Could you tell us your side of that story? What happened there?
I mean, in reality, it doesn't matter what happened there. I was in the wrong. That man deserved to enjoy his time in the pub without having it to end the way it did.
Controversy has always been a part of the MMA world, and it's played a major role in building the sport into what it's become. Since the beginning of the UFC, we've seen a diverse set of unique personalities. While some fighters have been more reserved and respectful, others have come off as highly controversial. Whether that's been due to run-ins with the law, engaging in trash talk, or just simply having an unlikable personality, there are some fighters out there that have set themselves apart from the rest. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at some of the most controversial fighters we've seen inside the UFC. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at some of the most controversial fighters in MMA history. Number 10. TITO ORTIZ. Former light heavyweight champion TITO ORTIZ was really the first villain the UFC ever had, and his nickname, the Huntington Beach Bad Boy, suited him well. His brash attitude and trash talk paved the way for Tito to become one of the UFC's biggest stars, and with that, also one of the most controversial.
Right here on the left side of me, this is the MGM. That's Ken Shank getting his ass kicked. And then after that, you guys want to come to an after party? About right here, that's my room. You guys can come to an after party.
Tito made no reservations when it came to giving off a bad boy persona, whether that came in the form of flipping off fellow fighters, burying his opponents with ceremonial grave digging after his wins, or perhaps feuding with UFC President Dana White. It's unquestionable that TITO ORTIZ certainly knew how to rile people up. His rivalries with the likes of Chuck Liddell and Ken Shamrock drew in a lot of attention, and his behaviour ticked all the boxes of a UFC villain. Number 9. Nick Diaz. Both Nick and Nate Diaz have a loyal and die-hard fan base. While there's no doubt part of that is largely due to their fighting style, it can also be attributed to their rather questionable behaviour.
Where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
Nick Diaz has always been at odds with authority, as is shown in the times he's butted heads with UFC President Dana White.
Could you ever take his word again, or is that trust gone?
I would never accept his word again.
Before Nick Diaz even entered into the UFC, he had built up a reputation as one of the most controversial fighters outside of the promotion. The most notable instance occurred when he famously jumped Jason Mayhem Miller in front of millions of viewers on national television, which remains to this day one of the most infamous moments in combat sports history. Following his transition over to the UFC, he began making headlines for no-showing press conferences, receiving suspensions, and announcing fake retirements. He also had a knack for taunting his opponents and spewing insults their way during the fights. Overall, Nick Diaz was unapologetically uncensored, making him just as popular as he is controversial. Number 8. Colby Covington.
Perhaps the most hated man in mixed martial arts right now, the one and only Colby Covington.
Fans simply love to hate Colby Covington, and quite frankly, he actually seems to enjoy it. Unlike most fighters, Covington fully embraces the role of the villain. He deliberately antagonises people to promote himself and draw a reaction.
Tomorrow night I'm gonna let my balls hang on this filthy animal's face, live on pay-per-view. Don't miss it, let's go!
The past few years have been filled with divisive comments from Colby Covington, aimed at both fighters and fans alike, and has even resulted in several altercations outside of the octagon. Whether he's insulting the country of Brazil, making controversial jokes at the expense of Matt Hughes, or stirring up trouble with UFC President Dana White.
He's a big mouth idiot.
He certainly knows how to rile up a crowd. But Colby Covington has made it clear he isn't in the business to make friends. Instead, he's only there to make money. And at the end of the day, he doesn't really care if you like him or dislike him. He only cares if you're tuning in. Number 7. Ronda Rousey. While there's no denying Ronda Rousey's accomplishments as a fighter and athlete, she hasn't always been the most pleasing to fans. On many occasions, Rousey has shown unsportsmanlike conduct, whether it be shrugging off handshakes, refusing to touch gloves, trying to intimidate her opponents, or simply showing a little bit too much attitude.
You're used to wiping your ass with the other hand.
Fans began getting tired of her antics, and her 2 losses to Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes Well, it only showed more unlikable behaviour. Rather than just accepting those defeats, Rousey seemed incapable of coming to terms with the losses, which attracted a lot of criticism from fans. Her brash behaviour along with her inability to accept defeat ended up alienating most of her fanbase. Number 6. Josh Koscheck.
You know, people think because of the daily thing I'm defending Koscheck. Koscheck's a dick. I don't get along with Koscheck at all.
Josh Koscheck has always had a knack for getting under people's skin, and quite frankly, he seemed to enjoy playing the role of a bad guy. For most fans, Koscheck came off as extremely unlikable, mostly because it seemed he never had anything nice to say.
I say what I feel, and if you don't like it, tough.
Although he didn't exactly have much support to begin with, people really began disliking him after he appeared as a coach on The Ultimate Fighter, where he did everything in his power to irritate Georges St. Pierre in the lead up to their fight, including insulting his Canadian fanbase. His antics on the show and his overall demeanour made most people despise him, and losing his fight to Georges St. Pierre didn't do him any favours. Oh, and faking injuries during his fight certainly didn't help either. Unfortunately for Koscheck, his career did not end on a good note, losing 5 fights in a row before leaving the UFC to join Bellator, where he also lost by a knockout in his debut. Number 5. Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping's career is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, his road to the top of his division to fulfill his lifelong dream of becoming a world champion was incredibly inspiring. That being said, it wasn't without its fair share of controversy. Bisping has always been known to say whatever comes to his mind, and more often than not, that comes in the form of an insult towards his opponents.
I don't care about smashing this dickhead's head, it's my night, that's gonna happen.
On some occasions, his non-filtered trash talk gave us a good laugh.
Conceive, believe, achieve. Shut the f up.
But there were other times where it was far less amusing. Bisping often came off as arrogant and unsportsmanlike in his early career, which rubbed both fighters and fans the wrong way. And being granted several controversial wins along with cheating in the octagon only made things worse. Although Bisping's reputation improved drastically during the latter parts of his career, there was a time where Michael Bisping was one of the most hated figures on the roster. Number 4. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar became an almost immediate star in the UFC following his transition from the WWE. But a lot of the recognition that Lesnar earned in the octagon was based more on popularity than skill, which rubbed many people the wrong way. Lesnar gained a lot of early criticism for essentially leapfrogging everyone in his division to earn a title shot after just one win in the UFC. He also received a lot of criticism for the way he behaved after his fight with Frank Mir. He even took things one step further by insulting the UFC's sponsor during his post-fight speech at UFC 100, which understandably landed him in quite a bit of hot water. Lesnar's reputation was damaged further after it was revealed that he tested positive for a banned substance following his comeback fight with Mark Hunt. He was given a 1-year suspension along with a hefty fine, and hasn't competed since. Still, Lesnar has never really been one to care if people like him or dislike him. Number 3. Chael Sonnen. Before Conor McGregor, Chael Sonnen was the king of trash talk. Similar to Colby Covington, Chael Sonnen was well known for embracing the role of the bad guy. Sonnen made no reservations when it came to dishing out trash talk, with his most notable work coming against Anderson Silva and the Brazilian crowd.
He's got a black belt under the Nogueira brothers. I think a black belt under the Nogueira brothers is saying I got a free toy in my Happy Meal.
While it was no doubt hilarious at the time, there were a few instances where Sonnen definitely crossed the line. While some people undoubtedly loved it, there were many others who simply couldn't stand it.
I kill him fast.
Apart from several controversial remarks, Sonnen also ended up failing multiple drug tests, one of which resulted in him being fired from his job as a UFC analyst, in turn leading to him announcing his temporary retirement in 2014.
I said 1/10? You're telling me I'm 1/10 higher than the average man? Retest that. You must have caught me on a low day.
There's no doubting that Sonnen has brought in loads of entertainment and given us some of the best one-liners in MMA history, but it's hard to ignore the controversial aspects of his career. Number 2. John Jones. Oh dear, where do we start with Jon Jones? Jon Jones is perhaps the greatest talent the UFC has ever seen. But besides Conor McGregor, he is easily the most controversial. So let's briefly run down just a few of the reasons why Jon Jones is so controversial. He has been suspended and fined by athletic commissions countless times. He's been stripped of his championship title on 3 separate occasions, has tested positive for numerous banned substances, and has been taken into custody for violations like drag racing, driving under the influence, and fleeing the scene of a hit-and-run incident which left a pregnant woman injured. On top of all that, he has also caused an entire fight card to be cancelled after refusing to fight Chael Sonnen. And we haven't even mentioned his reputation for poking opponents in the eye. At this point, it's clear that Jon Jones is no stranger to controversy. Luckily, he's managed to steer clear of trouble for the most part during this past year. Number 1. Conor McGregor. In the span of a few short years, Conor McGregor became a global icon in the world of combat sports. He became the first ever simultaneous 2-division champion, and quickly solidified himself as the UFC's biggest star. But with that greatness came a pattern of dangerous and reckless behaviour, which included throwing a dolly at a bus full of fighters, chucking bottles at press conferences, taking things too far on Twitter, smacking phones out of the hands of fans, shoving referees, and even punching an elderly man in an Irish pub. And the worrying thing is, that's just scratching the surface. Ever since his rise to superstardom, McGregor has become the centre of controversy. Truthfully, it's been a tragic turn of events, especially when you consider that McGregor was once a source of inspiration for so many young fighters. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.
Never have a doubt, do you like me now? Am I good enough now? Should I get more loud to get hear the fucking sound? Oh no, I'm losing my shit again, having to fit again. Man, I'm forgetting when I used to have some friends. I used to play pretend, we all grow up and then hating my phone and trends. I'm about to blow my head, nobody knows I'm dead. Fear I'm a ghost instead, think that I'm close, I get straight comatose in bed. Try to go slow with breath, without my nose and head. Heart doesn't go the trend, faster it goes.